Imagine you have unlocked the greatest secret in the history of science. You have figured out how to create life itself, how to take dead matter and breathe something living, something breathing, something aware into it. You have done what no human being has ever done before. And then you look at what you've made and you run. That is the moment at the center of one of the most powerful novels ever written. Published in 1818 by a 20-year-old woman named Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, is not really a horror story. It is something far more unsettling than that. It is a story about ambition without responsibility, about the children we bring into the world, literally or figuratively, and then abandon when they stop being the dream we imagined. It is a story that feels more relevant with every passing decade. So let's go back to the beginning and follow the tragic arc of one man's obsession and the extraordinary creature it unleashed upon the world.
The novel opens in a surprising place, on the ice. We are somewhere in the Arctic, following an explorer named Robert Walton, who was on a ship pushing further and further north, hungry for glory and discovery. In a series of letters to his sister back home in England, Walton describes something extraordinary. His crew spots a gigantic figure crossing the ice on a dog sled, moving impossibly fast, disappearing into the white distance. And then, shortly after, they pull from the freezing water a man near death, hollow-eyed, frostbitten, burning with some terrible inner obsession. His name is Victor Frankenstein, and as he recovers aboard the ship, he decides to tell Walton his story. Everything we are about to hear is Victor's own account of what happened to him, which is important because Victor is not always the most reliable narrator of his own life. Victor grew up in Geneva, Switzerland, the beloved eldest son of a devoted family. His childhood, by his own telling, was idyllic. He was surrounded by love, comfort, and intellectual curiosity. His closest companion was a young woman named Elizabeth Lavenza, an orphan who had been taken in by his family and whom Victor adored from boyhood. He also had a dear friend, Henry Clerval, who was warm and imaginative, everything that Victor himself would gradually fail to be. From an early age, Victor was consumed by one burning question. What is the secret of life? What animates matter? What is the force that separates the living from the dead? He devoured the old alchemists, men like Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus, figures his father dismissed as nonsense. When Victor finally arrived at the University of Ingolstadt in Germany, he expected to find that same dismissal from his professors. Instead, one of them, a brilliant and passionate lecturer named Professor Waldman, ignited something in Victor. He spoke about how modern science had, in its own way, accomplished miracles. And Victor decided, quietly and intensely, that he would accomplish the greatest miracle of all. He would discover the principle of life, and he would use it to create a living being. What followed were years of obsessive, solitary work. Victor haunted graveyards and charnel houses, collecting body parts, studying the process of death and decay in reverse. He refused to write home. He ignored his health, his friendships, his sense of proportion. He describes this period with a kind of feverish ecstasy, the sensation of being so close to a discovery that nothing else in the world seemed to matter. And then, one November night, by the light of a candle, it happened. The creature opened its eyes, it breathed, and Victor was horrified. This is the pivot on which the entire novel turns. Victor had imagined that the being he created would be beautiful, assembled from the finest parts, animated by the secret of life. But when he saw the creature's watery eyes, its yellow skin stretched over its enormous frame, its black lips and mismatched proportions, he felt nothing but revulsion. He fled the room. He ran out into the streets of Ingolstadt and wandered the night in a panic, desperately trying to forget what he had done. The creature was left alone in Victor's rooms, abandoned in the first moments of its existence. Here is where the story deepens in ways that separate it from any simple monster tale. While Victor falls ill, collapsing into a feverish breakdown that lasts months and is nursed by the faithful Clerval, the creature survives on its own. And through a long, extraordinary passage at the center of the book, we eventually hear the creature's own story. The creature wandered out into the world, confused and terrified, pelted with stones by the first humans it encountered. It found refuge near a remote cottage inhabited by a poor old man named DeLacy and his adult children, Felix and Agatha, along with a young woman named Safie who eventually joins them. Hidden in a lean-to built against the cottage wall, the creature watched this family for months. Through that patient observation, it learned language, history, and human feeling. It read great books. It began to understand what it was and what it was not. It felt love, a longing, desperate, deeply human love for this family it could only observe from the shadows. And eventually, in a moment of heartbreaking courage, it revealed itself to the blind DeLacy, who received it kindly. But when Felix and Agatha saw it, they fled in terror. Felix beat it away, and the family vanished. That rejection broke something in the creature. Realizing it had a creator, having found Victor's journal in the coat it had taken, it made its way to Geneva, towards the man responsible for its existence and its loneliness. On the road there, something terrible happened. The creature encountered a small child alone in the woods. The child screamed at the sight of it. The creature, in a moment of enraged desperation, reached out and strangled the boy. When it found a locket on the child bearing a portrait of a beautiful woman, it slipped the evidence into the pocket of a nearby sleeping woman, a young servant named Justine, knowing she would be blamed. The dead child was William Frankenstein, Victor's youngest brother. Victor had returned home to find his family in mourning, and when he heard the news of William's death and saw Justine condemned, he knew, with silent, paralyzing guilt, the truth. He said nothing. Justine was executed. Victor carried that knowledge like a stone. It was shortly after this that Victor came face to face with the creature for the first time since its creation. They met in the mountains above Chamonix, in the shadow of glaciers, and the creature spoke, eloquently, fiercely, and with devastating moral clarity. It told Victor, "You made me, you abandoned me. Every human who has seen me has hated me. I am lonely beyond endurance. Give me a companion. Make me a female creature as you made me, and I will vanish from human sight forever and harm no one." Victor agreed. He returned to England, took Henry Clerval with him, and eventually settled on the remote Orkney Islands to work in secret. He nearly completed a second creature, but in the final moments, he stopped. He looked at what he was making and felt a fresh wave of horror, not at the creature's appearance this time, but at the implications. What if they had children? What if he was unleashing a race of beings who would dominate and destroy humanity? He tore the half-finished creature apart. The creature, watching through the window, let out a sound of anguish and fury, and before disappearing into the darkness, it made a promise. "I will be with you on your wedding night." Victor had been planning to marry Elizabeth. He understood the threat, but he misread it. He assumed the creature meant to kill him that night. He sent Elizabeth away from their room to protect her. And while he waited with a pistol in his hand, the creature slipped to her room and killed her. Clerval had already been murdered. Victor's father died of grief. Victor was now utterly, devastatingly alone. And he vowed to pursue the creature to the ends of the earth, which is exactly how he ended up on the Arctic ice, nearly dead, being pulled from the frozen sea by Robert Walton. Victor dies aboard Walton's ship, still burning with the need for vengeance, without ever achieving it. And then, in one of the most haunting endings in all of literature, the creature appears. It boards the ship and finds Victor dead. It stands over its maker's body and weeps. It does not triumph. It grieves, for the relationship it never had, for the love it was never given, for the life it was never allowed to live. It tells Walton it intends to journey further north, to build its own funeral pyre and end its existence, because there is nothing left for it in a world that never wanted it. And then it leaves and is seen no more.
The reason Frankenstein keeps mattering, 200 years after a teenager wrote it during a rainy summer on the shores of Lake Geneva, is that it is not a book about a monster. It is a book about what we make, and whether we are willing to take responsibility for it. Think about the world right now. We are living through an age of extraordinary creation. Artificial intelligence systems that can hold conversations, write novels, generate faces of people who have never existed. Genetic technologies that are beginning to allow us to edit the building blocks of life itself. Synthetic biology, autonomous weapons, social media algorithms that were designed without any real reckoning for what they would do to human psychology, to democracy, to children's mental health. Victor Frankenstein is not a monster. He's a brilliant person who fell in love with his own capability, who was so intoxicated by what he could do that he never stopped to ask what he should do, and who, the moment things became uncomfortable, looked away. The creature is not the villain of the story. It is the consequence of that abandonment. The novel asks us, what happens to the things we create and then refuse to care for? Mary Shelley was writing at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, watching machines replace human labor, watching science accelerate in ways that thrilled and terrified in equal measure. She was also writing as a woman, the daughter of two radical philosophers, the partner of a poet, who knew something about what it felt like to be created by forces larger than yourself, and then left to navigate a world that had not been designed with you in mind. The creature is, in some readings, every marginalized person who ever knocked on a door and found it slammed, every being that asked for recognition and received rejection, every child who came into the world not as it was imagined and was therefore discarded. But Mary Shelley is careful not to let the creature off the moral hook entirely. The creature chooses violence, it chooses revenge, and in doing so, it becomes something close to what it was feared to be. That, too, is a warning. The consequences of abandonment are not only the abandoner's responsibility, they become part of a cycle that destroys everyone. There is also the subtitle to consider, the modern Prometheus. In Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, and was punished for eternity, chained to a rock, his liver eaten daily by an eagle. The fire is power. The punishment is the cost of overreaching. Victor stole the fire of life itself, created something he could not control, and paid for it with everything he loved. The story is a myth in the oldest sense, a story told to remind us where the edges of human hubris lie. Mary Shelley gave the world a story that refuses to offer easy answers. There is no hero, really. There is a man who was brilliant and cowardly. There is a creature who was eloquent and violent. There is love abandoned. There is ambition unchecked. There is loneliness so profound it becomes catastrophic. The lesson of Frankenstein is not that we should stop creating. It is that creation carries an obligation, that the things we make, the technologies we build, the institutions we design, the children we bring into the world, do not simply happen and then belong to themselves. They come from us, they carry our fingerprints, and they will come back to us one way or another. Victor Frankenstein is not a cautionary tale about science. He's a cautionary tale about abdication, about the moment a person decides that the responsibility of what they have done is simply too much to bear and turns away. Don't turn away. Mary Shelley was 20 when she wrote those words into the world. 2 centuries later, on a planet where we are creating things that may outlast us and reshape everything we know, she is still speaking directly to us. and it would serve us well to listen.